Most people never realize that the distance between where they are and where they want to be isn't measured in miles. It isn't measured in money. It isn't even measured in time. It's measured in daily decisions so small, so quiet, so invisible, that most people walk right past them every single day of their lives and never once notice what they're missing. Think about that for a moment. You've been trying. You've been working. Maybe you've read the books, watched the videos, made the plans, started the routines. And yet something keeps staying out of reach. Not because you lack talent. Not because the world is unfair. But because the real difference between people who build something meaningful with their lives and people who spend decades almost getting there is not what they do in the big moments. It's what they do in the quiet ones. This is the whole truth. And everything I'm going to say from this point forward is just a different way of showing you the same thing from a different angle until you can't unsee it anymore. The small habits. The ones that feel like nothing. Those are the ones that build everything. Let me tell you about a man I once knew. He was brilliant. Genuinely gifted. The kind of person who could walk into a room and within 20 minutes, everyone in that room believed he was going to do something extraordinary with his life. And he believed it too. He had vision. He had passion. He had big ideas that he talked about constantly. But here's what he also had, a snooze button he hit every morning without thinking. A habit of checking his phone the moment he opened his eyes. A tendency to start things when he felt inspired and abandon them when he didn't. A pattern of making grand announcements about what he was going to do, followed by long stretches of waiting to feel ready enough to actually do it. Years passed. And slowly, the people around him who seemed less talented, less articulate, less obviously gifted, quietly moved past him. Not because they outworked him in some dramatic, cinematic way. But because every morning, they did something small. And every evening, they did something small. And every week, those small things stacked on top of each other like bricks, and one day, those bricks became walls, and those walls became a building, and that building was a life. He's still waiting to feel ready. Ask yourself. Honestly. Are you waiting for something too? Are you waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, the right level of confidence, the right amount of certainty before you begin doing consistently what you keep planning to do eventually? Because here's the truth. The right moment is not coming. It was never coming. And the people who succeed don't wait for it. They do the small thing today, even without it. You see, there's a habit that separates people more than almost any other, and it has nothing to do with productivity systems or morning routines or any of the things people talk about. It's the habit of honesty with yourself. Not brutal self-criticism. Not self-hatred dressed up as self-awareness. Just the quiet, consistent practice of looking at your life clearly and asking, am I doing what I know I should be doing? Not what I plan to do. Not what I intend to do. What I am actually doing. Most people avoid this question. They stay busy so they don't have to sit with it. They consume content about changing their lives as a substitute for actually changing their lives. They convince themselves that learning is the same as doing, that planning is the same as acting, that awareness is the same as transformation. It isn't. The moment you start being honest with yourself, something uncomfortable happens. You realize that you already know most of what you need to know. The problem was never information. The problem was the habit of applying what you know to how you actually live, day after day, and the small decisions no one else can see. That's where the real work is. And that's where most people never go. There was a woman who came to a point in her life where she was exhausted. Not the kind of tired you feel after a long day. The deep kind. The kind where you wake up already worn out before the day has even started. She was managing everything. Her job. Her home. Her family. Her obligations. She was responsible and dependable and everyone counted on her. But she had a secret that she barely admitted to herself. She hadn't done one single thing for her own growth in years. Not one book that was truly for her. Not one morning where she woke up and worked on something that was hers. Not one evening where she chose herself over the noise. She had convinced herself she didn't have time. And in a practical sense, that was true. Her days were full. But here's what she eventually realized, and it changed everything. She had time for the things she had made habits. She had time to scroll her phone for an hour every night because that was automatic. She had time for television because that required no decision. She had built her days around the habits she had, not the habits she needed. So she started small. Not dramatically. She didn't overhaul her life in a week. She woke up 20 minutes earlier. Just 20 minutes, and she used those 20 minutes to read something that fed her mind instead of numbing it. That was it. Nothing else changed. Just that. 6 months later, she told me that those 20 minutes had become the most important part of her day. Not because 20 minutes is a long time. It isn't. But because those 20 minutes sent a message to some deeper part of herself every single morning that said, "You matter. Your growth matters. You are someone who invests in herself." And that message, repeated daily, slowly began to change who she believed she was. That is what a small habit does. It doesn't just change your behavior. It changes your identity. And identity, once changed, changes everything else. Now understand this. The reason most people never change is not that they don't want to. Most people genuinely want better for themselves. They want more peace, more focus, more success, more meaning. The reason most people never change is that they are trying to change their results without changing their identity. And identity, once changed, changes everything else. Now understand this. The reason most people never change is not that they don't want to. Most people genuinely want better for themselves. They want more peace, more focus, more success, more meaning. The reason most people never change is that they are trying to change their results without changing their identity. They want the outcome without becoming the person who creates that outcome. Think about it. You can force yourself to exercise for 2 weeks. But if you still see yourself as someone who doesn't exercise, those 2 weeks will collapse the moment life gets difficult. You can force yourself to save money for a month. But if your identity is still that of someone who is bad with money, the habit won't survive because it doesn't belong to who you believe you are. The small habits that separate people aren't powerful because of what they produce in a single day. They are powerful because of what they say about who you are becoming. The person who makes their bed every morning isn't doing it because a made bed changes their productivity. They're doing it because they are the kind of person who does things with intention. The person who reads 10 pages a day isn't doing it to race through books. They're doing it because they are the kind of person who never stops learning. The person who writes down 3 things they're grateful for each evening isn't doing it to feel better in the moment. They're doing it because they are the kind of person who trains their mind to find what is good in life. Same small action. But it's not about the action. It's about what the action says about who you are deciding to be. Let me ask you something. And I want you to really sit with this. How many years have you already spent knowing what you need to do and not doing it consistently? Not because you couldn't, but because you kept waiting for motivation, for discipline, for some external force to come and push you into the life you already know you're capable of living. The person who waits for motivation will always be waiting. Motivation is not a foundation. It's a weather event. It comes and goes. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't. You cannot build a house on weather. You build a house on ground. The small daily habits are the ground. They don't require you to feel inspired. They don't require you to be certain. They just require you to show up. And in showing up, consistently, without fanfare, without announcement, without an audience, you become the kind of person who shows up. And that kind of person gets somewhere. There's a quiet arrogance that lives in all of us that we rarely talk about. It's the belief that we are somehow exempt from the ordinary process of becoming. That because we understand things, because we can see clearly what needs to change, we should be able to skip the boring, repetitive, unglamorous work of actually changing. I've seen intelligent people stay stuck for decades because of this. They think too well to follow through simply. They can always find a reason why their situation is different, why the usual wisdom doesn't apply to them, why they need a more sophisticated approach before they can begin. But you see, real growth is deeply ordinary. The person who eventually transforms their life doesn't do it through some dramatic breakthrough. They do it through the accumulation of small, honest, repeated actions done in private when no one is watching. Done on the days they don't feel like it. Done even when they can't see the results yet. Done even when doubt is loud. There's a young man I think about often. He grew up with very little. Not just materially, but in terms of belief. No one in his family had ever built something of their own. No one had shown him what sustained effort looked like. He came into adulthood with enormous energy and enormous confusion, not knowing which direction to pour himself into. What changed his life wasn't a single mentor or a single moment. It was the night he sat quietly alone and made a decision not about what he was going to achieve, but about how he was going to live every single day from then on. He wrote down 5 simple things he would do every day without exception. Nothing dramatic. Nothing impressive sounding. Wake up at the same time. Spend 30 minutes on something that builds the future. Move his body. Read. Review his day before sleeping. That was it. He didn't need someone to be impressed by his list. He just did it. Day after day. And the compound interest of those 5 habits, over months and then years, produced a life that looked to everyone else like talent and luck but was really just discipline made invisible by time. The truth is, the most impressive lives are usually built from the most unimpressive daily actions. It's only from a distance that the building looks magnificent. Up close, it's just one brick placed on top of another, one day after another, by someone who decided that ordinary consistency was enough. I want to talk about something that doesn't get said enough. About the person you have been protecting. There is an old version of you. A version that formed early in life based on experiences you didn't choose, beliefs you absorbed before you were old enough to question them, patterns you developed to survive circumstances that no longer exist. And for years, you have been unconsciously defending that version of yourself. Not because it serves you, but because it is familiar. And the mind, whatever else it is a machine that prefers the familiar over the unknown, even when the familiar is painful and the unknown is the life you actually want. The small habits I'm talking about are not just behavioral changes. They are daily acts of choosing the new version of yourself over the old one. Every morning when you resist the pull of the snooze button and get up with intention, you are choosing the new version. Every time you do the work before you feel like it, you are choosing the new version. Every time you put down what numbs you and pick up what builds you, you are choosing the new version. This is the deepest truth about habits. They are not about productivity. They are about identity. Every small choice you make consistently is a vote for the person you are becoming. And when you cast enough of those votes, in the same direction, over enough time, the person you become is no longer the person you used to be. And that is the whole point. Ask yourself what your life would look like 3 years from now if you simply started doing the small things you already know you should be doing. Not dramatically. Not perfectly. Just consistently. The answer, if you're honest with yourself, is extraordinary. Not because the small habits are magic, but because almost no one does them consistently. The bar is not as high as you think. The gap between where most people are and where they could be is not closed by genius or talent or luck. It is closed by the willingness to do ordinary things with extraordinary consistency. You don't need to be exceptional to begin. You just need to begin. There is a version of you that has been living on the edge of change for a long time. Reading. Learning. Understanding. Always almost ready. Always one more piece of information away from starting. Always intending to do tomorrow what today offers. And there is another version of you. The one that doesn't wait for the perfect conditions. The one that begins in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the doubt, in the middle of the fear, because it understands that beginning is the only way through. The one that chooses a small habit and protects it like something sacred, because it understands that in that small habit lives the entire direction of a life. These two versions of you are not separated by years of suffering or dramatic transformation. They are separated by a single decision made on an ordinary day. The decision to start living like the person you are trying to become before you feel like that person. Because here is the final truth that ties everything together. You will never feel ready. Readiness is not a feeling. It is not a state you arrive at before you begin. It is something you build by beginning. The feeling of capability comes after the habit, not before it. The confidence comes after the action, not before it. The belief in yourself comes from the evidence of yourself, and the evidence only exists if you show up to create it. So stop waiting for the version of you that has it all figured out to show up and take over. That version is not waiting somewhere else. That version is what you are building, slowly, quietly, through the small things you do every single day when no one is watching and nothing feels important. Every single day is a day you either spent becoming who you want to be, or a day you spent staying who you have been. That is the whole lesson. There is a version of you that keeps waiting. And there is a version of you that finally decides. One lives in the planning. The other lives in the doing. One talks about the life. The other builds it, quietly, one small habit at a time. The choice has always been yours. It was yours yesterday. It is yours today. And it will be yours tomorrow morning when the alarm goes off and the old version of you wants to stay exactly where it is. What you do in that moment, that ordinary, invisible, unspectacular moment, is who you are. Make it count.